The studio lights snapped on like a warning flare. Everyone on set already knew tonight would be different, louder, angrier, heavier. For the past 48 hours, one clip had consumed every corner of the internet. A press conference, a simple question from a young female reporter, and then Trump, leaning into the mic with that smug half-grin, spitting out the words. "Quiet, piggy." The moment it aired, the country didn't just react, it detonated. Social feeds exploded, talk shows went into meltdown mode, and protests formed outside news stations within hours. But nothing hit harder than the fact that tonight, sitting at the center desk, was Denzel, calm, focused, and visibly angry in a way no headline could capture. He adjusted his headset, fingers tapping against the desk, jaw tightening as the viral clip replayed on the large screen behind him. The studio fell into a suffocating silence. The host turned to him as the video ended. "Denzel, your reaction?" He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. The weight in his eyes said everything long before he spoke. And when he finally did, his voice was steady, too steady. "This is shameful." The room shifted. The control booth froze. Even the host leaned back, knowing that tone was the beginning of something big. Denzel continued, leaning into the mic with the kind of clarity that made the entire studio forget to breathe. "Calling any woman that, especially a reporter just doing her job, that's not leadership. That's not strength. That's not America. And pretending it's just Trump being Trump is exactly how the rot spreads." Behind him, the viral clip replayed in slow motion as if mocking the moment. The outrage outside the building grew louder, chants, car horns, megaphones, all bleeding faintly into the studio audio. Denzel wasn't done. "This isn't politics. It's basic humanity. And if we can't call this out for what it is, then we've already lost more than we think." The host swallowed hard. The clip continued looping. America was listening. The outrage outside the studio wasn't fading, it was growing. Reporter crews flooded the sidewalks, protesters held signs with Trump's quote in bold, furious letters, and satellite vans lined the street like a battlefield perimeter. Inside, the tension wrapped around the air vents, heavy and electric, vibrating through the studio floor. Producers whispered into headsets. Camera operators adjusted their angles with shaky hands. They weren't just filming a segment anymore, they were capturing the pulse of a national crisis. Trump's team had tried all day to clarify his remark. First claiming it was a joke. Then claiming he said something else. Then claiming the audio was manipulated. But the raw footage, recorded from 6 different angles, didn't care about excuses. The insult was clear. And America had heard it. Denzel leaned forward, elbows on the desk, voice lowered as if delivering a verdict rather than commentary. "You know what's wild," he said. "We're not even shocked anymore. That's the dangerous part." He says something dehumanizing, and half the country shrugs like it's weather. The host opened his mouth to respond, but Denzel raised a finger. Calmly, respectfully, but firmly. The message was clear. "I'm not finished. You can't treat women like props, like targets, like punching bags," Denzel continued. "And the moment we start normalizing that, especially from someone who wants to lead, then we've lost the thread of what this country stands for." The control room replayed the clip again, this time zoomed in. The reporter flinching. Trump smirking. A few men behind him laughing like it was entertainment. Denzel exhaled sharply. Not dramatic, just disappointed. "Look at that," he said softly. They didn't see a woman. They saw a moment. A moment to flex power. A moment to punch down. And that's why this blew up. That's why people are angry. Because it's not about politics, it's about decency. The host asked, "Do you think he'll apologize?" Denzel didn't hesitate. No, he said flatly. But America will remember. The studio dimmed. Another wave of chants poured in from outside. And for the first time tonight, even the cameras seemed to lean closer. The moment the commercial break ended, the studio surged back to life, lights flaring, audience murmurs rising, cameras snapping into position. But the energy had changed. Something sharper had settled into the room, like everyone sensed they were no longer discussing a headline, they were walking straight into a cultural fault line. The host cleared his throat. We're back with Denzel Washington, reacting to the viral clip that. But he didn't finish. Because suddenly, the booth cut to a live feed. Trump's campaign spokesperson holding an emergency press briefing. The timing was perfect. The desperation was obvious. On the large screen behind them, the spokesperson leaned into the podium, fake calm dripping from every syllable. President Trump did not mean the comment in a derogatory way, she insisted. He was merely responding firmly to a rude question. The studio audience groaned. A few even laughed. The spokesperson kept going. This is yet another attempt by the media to twist his words. Denzel scoffed. Not loud, not theatrical, but enough that the mic caught it. Enough that the audience went dead silent. He leaned back in his chair, voice smooth as steel. You can't twist what someone said on camera, he muttered. We all heard it. There's no spin for that. The clip continued. The spokesperson's tone grew harsher, insisting the reporter provoked the insult. That women in media often weaponize emotion. That voters shouldn't be fooled by staged reactions. Denzel's eyebrows lifted. That was it. That was the moment everything snapped. Wow, he said, shaking his head slowly. Even now, even with the whole world watching, the story isn't, he crossed a line. It's, she deserved it. His voice dropped lower. That's not a defense. That's gaslighting. The host tried to interject, Denzel, but the audience erupted in applause, drowning him out. The control room had no choice but to let it ride. Denzel leaned closer to the camera, eyes locked in a kind of quiet fury. You don't get to insult someone, blame them for being offended, and then ask for their vote. That's not strength. That's cowardice. Wrapped in a suit. The applause grew louder. Outside, protesters chanted even harder. And somewhere in another studio across town, Trump's team watched, scrambling for a response, as the narrative slipped further out of their hands. The studio lights dimmed again, but this time the tension didn't settle, it sharpened. The host tried to regain control of the conversation, shuffling his notes, clearing his throat, doing everything short of waving a white flag. But the focus had shifted. The audience wasn't looking at him. The cameras weren't looking at him. America wasn't looking at him. They were all locked on Denzel. On the screen behind him, the Trump spokesperson wrapped up her desperate statement. Reporters shouted questions. She ignored all of them and sprinted off stage like someone fleeing a crime scene. The feed cut. The studio snapped back to Denzel's face. And he wasn't smiling. You know what's wild, he said quietly. Every time he crosses a line, the people around him try to pretend the line never existed. The host nodded nervously. Do you think this scandal will last? Denzel didn't hesitate. It should. He leaned forward, elbows locked on the desk, voice controlled but heavy, like he was carrying something the rest of the room refused to pick up. Because when powerful men insult women, then blame the woman for reacting, that's not politics. That's abuse. Just televised. The audience murmured, anger, agreement, shock blending into a single wave. Denzel continued, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make every word sting. And here's the problem. If nobody pushes back, the next insult gets harsher. The next lie gets bolder. The next target gets younger. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. The host swallowed. And before long, Denzel added, "We wake up in a country where cruelty isn't an accident, it's a strategy." The room froze. Even the cameras seemed to stay still. Outside, chants shook the windows. The city had become a drum. Denzel looked straight into camera 2, voice low but cutting. "Don't let anyone tell you this is normal." The segment timer flashed red in the booth. They needed a break. But no one dared cut him off. The next segment opened with a camera push-in, slow and deliberate, like the director knew the country was leaning closer to their screens. The studio lights glowed colder now, reflecting off the metal edges of the desk. The host adjusted his tie, inhaled sharply, and attempted to steer the discussion back to neutral ground. But neutral ground didn't exist tonight. "Denzel," he began, "some are saying the outrage is exaggerated. That this is being blown out of proportion for political gain." Denzel's eyebrows rose. That was all it took. "Blown out of proportion," he echoed, almost laughing. "A woman gets insulted on national television by a man running for president, and somehow she's the problem? Somehow the public reaction is the real issue?" The audience buzzed, a low hum of frustration and agreement. Denzel shook his head slowly, disbelief turning into something sharper. "This is exactly how it works," he said. "Someone powerful crosses a line, and the conversation magically shifts to whether people are allowed to be upset. It's a magician's trick. A distraction. Look over here, don't look at the insult, look at the outrage about the insult." The host tried again. "Some supporters argue that he just talks tough." "That's not talking tough," Denzel cut in. "That's punching down. That's what bullies do. Strength isn't measured by how many people you can humiliate. It's measured by how you treat people with less power than you." The audience applauded, longer this time. Outside, the chanting grew louder, syncing with the studio floor vibrations. The control room signaled the host to calm things down, but he hesitated. It was clear. This moment wasn't his to interrupt. "And let's be real," Denzel added. "If calling a woman piggy is just talking tough, then the bar for leadership has sunk so low it's underground." A stunned silence swept the room. Denzel didn't break eye contact with the lens. America deserves better than a man who needs to insult women to feel strong. The network decided to escalate. Without warning, the control booth switched the screen behind Denzel to a compilation, every major outlet replaying Trump's insult, every angle, every microphone feed, every shocked reaction. Headlines flashed in rapid succession. Misogynistic outburst. Reporter humiliated on live TV. Trump doubles down. The audience gasped as the clip rolled again, this time slowed down so the entire room could feel the weight of the moment. The flinch, the laughter from Trump's staff behind him, the smug grin settling across his face like a mask he'd worn 1,000 times. The host whispered, "We didn't authorize this package, but the producers insisted through his earpiece. Let it play. The world is watching." When the screen finally faded back to the studio lights, Denzel leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. The tension in his posture wasn't anger, it was purpose. "You know what this shows?" he asked, voice low but resonant. This wasn't just a slip. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't locker room talk. He meant it. The people behind him meant it. And the people defending him now? They mean it, too. The host shifted uncomfortably. "Some would argue it's being overanalyzed." Denzel chuckled, dark, humorless. "When a man with that much influence calls a woman an animal, it's not overanalysis. It's a warning sign." The audience snapped into applause, short, sharp, emotional. "And here's the part nobody wants to talk about," Denzel continued. "When powerful men get away with this once, they don't stop. They escalate. The next target becomes easier. The cruelty becomes normalized. And eventually, the people watching start thinking that's just how leaders talk. The host whispered, "So what now?" Denzel didn't blink. "Now we decide," he said. "Do we shrug and move on? Or do we draw a line and say, this is not who we are?" Outside, the crowd roared. Thousands of voices echoing down the street. Inside, Denzel's calm stare carried the weight of the moment. "This isn't about politics," he finished. "This is about who gets to be treated like a human being." The studio's atmosphere shifted again, this time into something colder, heavier, almost judicial. The producers flashed breaking news graphics across the screen, and suddenly another clip appeared, Trump speaking at a rally just an hour earlier. Same tone. Same pattern. Same smirk. He doubled down again. "We don't need soft reporters," Trump yelled to a cheering crowd. "If they can't handle a little tough talk, they should find another job." The crowd roared. But inside the studio? Dead silence. Denzel watched the clip with an expression that wasn't anger anymore, it was disappointment, deep and tired, the kind that comes from watching a cycle repeat far too many times. When the clip ended, he spoke quietly. "There it is. That's the script. Insult someone. Then call them weak for reacting. It's manipulation. It's classic power play psychology. And people fall for it because they think cruelty equals strength." The host muttered, "He's rallying his base. But at what cost?" Denzel fired back. "You can rally people without dehumanizing them. You can lead without belittling. If the only way to energize your supporters is by insulting women, then maybe the problem isn't the reporter. Maybe the problem is you." A low rumble of applause built in the audience, hesitant at first, then stronger once others joined. Even the host seemed taken aback by how deeply the sentiment landed. Denzel continued, voice steady and deliberate. "Every time he does this, people try to excuse it. He's joking. He didn't mean it. She was out of line. But look at the pattern. The target is always the same, women. Women who speak. Women who ask questions. Women who don't shrink." He leaned closer. "And he knows exactly what he's doing. Because if you can intimidate women in public, you can silence them in private." A woman in the audience wiped a tear. Another shook her head in disbelief. "This isn't about politics," Denzel said. "It's about character. And whether we let the most powerful man in the country teach the next generation that disrespect is leadership." The camera zoomed in as he finished. "America's better than this. Or at least, we should be." The host took a breath, trying to regain control of the conversation, but the energy in the room had already shifted. The audience, once split, unsure, was now leaning in, hanging on every word Denzel spoke. Even the cameras seemed to drift toward him, as if the entire broadcast had quietly reassigned him as the anchor of the night. Trump, watching remotely from his rally's backstage room, appeared again on the split screen. He was red-faced, pacing, visibly irritated that the narrative was slipping through his fingers. The producers muted him for a moment, showing only his agitated gestures, hands chopping the air, pointing, mouth moving faster than his thoughts. When his audio returned, he forced a laugh. A brittle, strained laugh. "Oh look," Trump said mockingly, trying to shake it off, "Hollywood's moral compass is lecturing America again. How predictable." But this time, nobody laughed with him. Not the host. Not the audience. Not even the panelists. Denzel didn't flinch. "You can mock all you want," he said calmly, hands folded. "But insulting a woman on national television isn't strength. Calling her hormonal or hysterical isn't leadership. It's 1950s playground bullying with a bigger microphone." Trump tried to interrupt, but the host cut him off. "Mr. President, let him finish." That was the moment the entire studio felt it, the shift of authority. Trump's eyes narrowed, realizing he'd just been told to wait. Told to listen. Told to take a seat in a conversation he once dominated. Denzel continued. "You know what real leadership looks like? Taking responsibility. Respecting people. Especially people who challenge you. Especially women who challenge you." He leaned slightly forward, voice dropping into something almost surgical. "You don't get to call women weak while hiding behind a crowd. You don't get to belittle them and expect applause. And you definitely don't get to lecture the rest of us about strength when your first instinct is always insult, never accountability." A wave of applause erupted, loud, sustained, undeniable. Trump glared into the camera, lips pressed tight. The blow had landed. And for the first time in the broadcast, he looked genuinely shaken. Trump's face on the giant split screen hardened into something colder, part fury, part disbelief. He wasn't used to losing control of a room, especially not to someone who refused to raise his voice. The rally crowd behind him began to sense it too, the awkward silence, the tension, the shift from dominance to damage control. He tried to recover. "You know what's shameful?" Trump snapped, jabbing his finger toward the camera. "People like you pretending to care about America while sitting in your Hollywood mansions." But Denzel cut in, not with volume, but with precision. "I live in the real world, Donald. The world where your words have consequences. The world where women go to work and get dismissed as emotional because men in power normalize it. The world where daughters grow up hearing leaders call them weak the moment they speak up." Trump froze, just for a second, but the camera caught it. That half-second of hesitation, that twitch of doubt, was enough. Denzel continued, eyes locked on the lens as if speaking directly to every viewer at home. "You don't get to insult half the country and then cry victim when we call it what it is, misogyny. Plain and simple. And the saddest part? You repeat it like it's strategy, like hurting people is a political plan." A murmur rippled through the studio. Even the host looked stunned. Trump scoffed, louder now, defensive. "Oh please, this is ridiculous." "Is it?" Denzel shot back. "Because last week you mocked a female reporter for asking a tough question. Before that, a senator. And tonight, another woman. That's a pattern, Donald. And the whole country's watching it unfold." The audience clapped again, but this time it wasn't scattered. It was decisive. Unified. Trump shook his head, his voice cracking as he tried to regain momentum. "You're twisting my words, this is all media spin." But no one was buying it. The energy had shifted too far. The narrative had already left his hands. A young woman in the crowd yelled, "Respect women." Another added, "Own your words." Trump's face tightened. This wasn't a debate anymore, this was a collapse happening in real time. And standing at the center of it, calm as a storm before impact, was Denzel Washington, refusing to blink. The studio lights dimmed just slightly, enough for the tension in the air to feel almost physical. Trump leaned forward, elbows on the podium, trying to force authority back into his posture. But authority wasn't something you could fake once the audience had seen the cracks. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he snapped, shifting his weight like a boxer who'd already lost the round but refused to step out of the ring. Denzel didn't move. He didn't smile. His voice dropped into that unmistakable, grounded tone, the kind that didn't shout, didn't strain, didn't beg for attention. It commanded it. "Donald," he said slowly, "women in this country aren't props in your speeches. They're not punchlines. They're not targets for your insecurity. They're citizens. Leaders. Mothers. Daughters. And they watched you tonight. Every word." Trump opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And let me tell you something else, Denzel continued, eyes steady. Respect isn't optional. It's the bare minimum. If you can't give that, you don't deserve the microphone you're holding. The audience erupted, not in a chaotic cheer, but in a wave of applause that carried weight. Applause that said, someone finally said it out loud. Trump shifted back, visibly rattled. He muttered something under his breath, something about fake outrage, fake news, but even he knew the moment had passed him by. It was slipping through his fingers, and there was no slogan strong enough to pull it back. The host tried to wrap things up, but the room had already chosen its headline. "Mr. Washington," she said, her voice softer now, "any final thoughts?" Denzel nodded once, slow, deliberate. "Words matter," he said. "Power matters. And when a leader uses his platform to tear people down, especially women, then that's not leadership. That's weakness pretending to be strength." Silence followed. Heavy. Unmistakable. Then Trump stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the studio floor. Cameras caught the moment, the clenched jaw, the frustration, the humiliation. He stormed off without waiting for the credits, leaving the host blinking at an empty space where he'd been seconds earlier. But Denzel stayed. Calm. Collected. Unshaken. He adjusted his blazer, looked straight into the lens, and delivered the final blow, not loud, not cruel, but sharp enough to echo across every screen it reached. America deserves better. Cut to black.